Okay, recording in progress. So, welcome everybody, and from the philosophy group and from the Northwest AGI Forum. This is kind of like Judgments 101. We're going to look at judgments from the perspective of, I'm going to try to do, I'm not an expert, but I'm going to try to present the basic feel I get for it anyway from psychology. Excuse me. And Victor is going to talk about the philosophical kind of standpoint, from the basis, from the perspective of Kantian judgment. So we've got a fair amount of material, and I set it for 90 minutes, but I don't know. We might go to 2 hours. I don't know. You can leave early, and I won't deduct credit or anything. So so anyway, the first. Why study judgments? And I guess, I mean, from my perspective, from the perspective of AI, from trying to be a developer, AGI, being interested in this for so long, we can talk about things like different approaches. We can debate consciousness. We can talk about concepts. We can debate endlessly on a number of things, but ultimately, if the machine doesn't give us a good judgment, it's all going to kind of be a waste. So it seems like it's a good idea to have a feel for the kind of the established theory of judgment, which I haven't really had personally. Everybody's got an idea of what judgment is, but it's a little bit different if you try to delve in and try to look at the research and that sort of thing. So that's excuse me, that's why I think it's important. And just to kind of get things started, I basically came up with an example of a good judgment and an example of a bad judgment. And if Microsoft IPO'd back in, I think it was 86. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know. Anyway, it was a long time ago, and at the time, people did not have computers in their homes. Businesses were still running mainframes mostly. I was a mainframe programmer. It was just kind of hard to envision the world changing to the way in which every household would have a computer, and businesses would shift to using client server and that kind of thing. But that was, if you invested in Microsoft in those days, and I know somebody, my colleague and friend at that time did, and personally I wasn't really that sold on it. It was hard for me to envision change that much, but she's smarter than me, and she invested, and she made a lot of money off of it. But the thing about this was that it was a really realistic choice, that objectively it was sound, that it was a good judgment from that perspective. For some reason, whenever I think of bad judgment, I always think of Robert E. Lee's decision at the Battle of Gettysburg to try to win the battle. And basically, at this point in the war, it was, I'm not sure if it was a stalemate or that maybe the North may have had a little bit of an upper hand, but Robert E. Lee decided to invade Virginia, and the Union and the Confederacy met in Gettysburg, and for a couple of days it was kind of it was a pretty significant battle, but neither side had really gained the advantage. But the Union had a really firm defensive position at the top of this long, narrow slope. And Robert E. Lee decided to basically charge up a mile-long hill in the open, exposed to all kinds of fire, to try to basically win the battle. And if he had won, he could have marched on Washington, D.C., and basically that would probably have ended the war. But fortunately, I mean, I'm glad the United States won. This was a spectacular failure, and basically he lost the war, and he lost the battle and probably the war. he went against the advice of General Longstreet, who you can read this excerpt that I have here, just told him that just don't do it. It's, it's not realistic. And I think historians look back on this and say, it was not, at the time, you didn't just run up really fast to the top of the hill. You walked, and they walked like a mile, and all this fire. It was a bad decision, not realistic. Okay. So Kahneman is basically, it seems like he's the most prominent scholarly figure in the study of judgments, and he termed the mind as a measuring instrument. So you're making a judgment, you're kind of measuring, and a judgment is the domain of issues that reasonable people are not going to agree on. There's going to be dispute and debate. And I have kind of plotted out the way he maps it out, Kahneman judgments, that for a mere matter of fact, typically we're all going to agree. We should, at least, but sometimes people don't get matters of fact right, but we should agree. We expect bounded disagreement on a matter of judgment. And if the judgment is too strange or absurd or crazy, we all agree that it's strange, absurd, and crazy. But expect bounded disagreement. Now, in AI, I think this is the realm where it gets really interesting, because all AIs are not going to agree in the same way that all people are going to agree, because the world is so complex. And so when I think of somebody solving AI, they're claiming to have solved it, I wonder, well, maybe you've got your machine is judging in a certain way, but that doesn't mean that's the only way that it's going to judge. So anyway, moving along, Kahneman describes the process of a judgment as you kind of you look at some situation, you create this overall impression, you focus on some features and ignore others. If it's some kind of probability, maybe if you're going to win cards or something, you convert to a prediction. I mean, a numerical prediction. And then he describes this sensation you get at the end of the judgment, where you go, oh, I got it. We're going to go ahead, fire. This is what we're going to do. So that's kind of, in a judgment, the basic script that happens. This is the whole thing right here, basically. We've got from psychology, it all seems to be organized, arranged, researched around these three types of models. So a descriptive model usually comes from psychology, in which the researchers are trying to determine how people actually make judgments in the wild, in real life. And usually that's not going to be ideal, but it won't be ideal. But so the descriptive model, the normative model, which is kind of the domain of philosophy, where you can sit back and think, well, what should we do ideally? And it's hard to get to the normative. How do we make judgments without bias? In the prescriptive models, it's kind of like clinical psychology, which that's the way Barron described it, where you say, well, we're making judgments in a certain fashion. We should be following some normative standard. The prescriptive model tells you how to get from the errors to the better judgments. So if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, basically these are the three alignments, and they all kind of, you can see how they fit into machine learning, because right now there's been a lot of talk about bias, and what we've got for test data is descriptive. It's not usually ideal. If you went to college, they crammed this into you. Probability theory, utility theory, and statistics. These are idealized ways of making decisions. You sit there in class and then and work on a lot of curves, and what's the best judgment to make by the numbers. Statistics is useful, but then when you get into the real world, you forget all that, right? So anyway, the best judgment according to Barron, which I really like the way best judgment is what helps us to achieve what we perceive to be our goals, and whatever our whatever is good. How should I say this? We pursue the good and avoid the bad. So if if the best judgment has the highest good, basically that's it. Instrumental rationality is a term that comes up a lot, and basically what this refers to is, if you make a judgment, have you got the actual means to bring it about? Is it realistic? And like in the case of Robert E. Lee and his charge at Gettysburg, did he really have the means to defeat the Union, to uproot the Union position? Well, probably not. And but Microsoft, did they have the means to create an operating system that would have put a PC in everybody's home and use in business too? Well, yeah, they did. So instrumental rationality, you hear that phrase a lot. But quickly studying judgments and decision making, it becomes obvious that we have limitations, and we have time limitations. We have problems may be significantly difficult. We always have to deal with our limitations in terms of capability. And the fact is that we're not computing machines in the sense of idealized optimality. So we have to make decisions that are going to be good enough. And Simon in the 50s was, there was an interest in and an explosion in research that went in this way. Bounded rationality. You're not going to get the optimal solution, but you're going to get the one that's good enough. So the heuristics and biases movement, it started in 1974 by Kahneman and Tversky, and basically this kind of groups together heuristics and biases into kind of the same thing. Like what might work as a heuristic also contains a bias that's going to make it limiting in certain circumstances. So it doesn't work for everything. And it's not really algorithmic. It's kind of somewhere in between. Okay, you've got this perception, and then you just fire the heuristic. We hope it works, but it's not really deep thinking. You're just going to you've learned these heuristics, and we hope it works. We're not sure, but the upshot of this research movement was that irrefutable evidence that decision making in humans is prone to systematic errors, which is not really a surprise, but when they prove something, it makes it a little bit more believable. Anyway, some more information about heuristics that I gathered was it's tough to come up with a perfectly general heuristic. They're mostly domain specific. So you're faced with some situation, you have to deal with the capabilities that you've got at hand, and look at the structure of the immediate situation, and then boom, you've got your heuristic. There's it makes it fairly fast. So Simon called this 1 and 2 the twin blades of the scissors, or something to that effect. Anyway, heuristics usually not conscious. Here's a couple of examples. Like, I'll just do what everybody else is doing. I pick the best. And since heuristics are usually just fired off, it's you need feedback. Well, you need feedback in psychology on life, period, but heuristics in particular, because you're not sitting there thinking about, well, what should I do optimally? It's based on the situation. And in the literature, they talk about as if optimization models. So what as if means is, I think, and after I'm done, maybe somebody can correct me, but like if you're swinging a tennis racket, you're acting as if you've got all these uh, procedures and differential equations, and that you've got this perfect understanding of physics, but actually you're just swinging a tennis racket. So it looks like you're doing all that, but it's not true. But anyway, and something that they mentioned about experts is that, which is really not a surprise, but experts can make a quick judgment with not much information. Like, so, you go to the doctor. Well, you've got some symptoms, some problem. You do some research on the internet, and you're convinced you're going to die right away. You go to the doctor, and the doctor takes a couple of tests and just says, yeah, you're fine, get out of here, and go back to work. Just wear your seatbelt and don't smoke. And so it's really no surprise. After a while, heuristics get to be really fine-tuned, is the message there. So as part of the heuristics and biases movement, I like these three canonical heuristics, which shouldn't come as any surprise, but they're kind of all, they're heuristics and they're heuristics and biases, it works quickly, but it's not going to always work that great. And like what they classify as representativeness, which is, you judge the likelihood of something based upon the typicality of the usual. So if you go into suppose you go into a fancy restaurant, and are they going to expect a fat tip? Well, it's, that would be typical. So that my heuristic is, I'm probably going to leave a fat tip, if I've got the money. Availability, favor what is easiest to imagine. Well, that's not hard to think of examples of. I mean, the thing about these is that we use them all the time, but they're prone to error. But like availability, my car has been having a no start situation, and at first I thought it was a dead battery, just because, well, that's the easiest thing to recall. And if I tested the battery, and in fact it was low, so I changed to replace the battery, but then about a week later it wouldn't start again. So the thing is that it's the fuel pump, I think. But anyway, the thing is that it usually will work. It probably usually is the battery. Anchoring is another heuristic where, like, for example, you walk into a store, shoes are on sale for, shoes are regularly $30, but we'll give them to you for $25. So they try to anchor you with this first thought of $30. So whatever you think after that might be, it's going to persuade you or not persuade you and make your judgment. But again, the thing about these is that we use them all the time, but they're prone to error. And this would translate into AGI too, I'm sure. One thing that comes up a lot, when I kept reading this, is that people tend to, they've got some choice they're starting to favor. They make a lot about, they try to inflate the goodness or the benefits of the good aspects, and but the negative parts they tend to downplay. So, and this comes up repeatedly, and confirmation bias, most people have heard of. You've got a hypothesis. If you find some evidence that confirms your hypothesis, you concentrate on that. But suppose somebody introduces some evidence which refutes it, then you can say, well, don't worry about it. So there's a tendency to place a lot of emphasis on the positive, but downplay the negative. And this is kind of a rephrasing of the three heuristics and biases that Kahneman identified, which I already described. And but the upshot of this slide is that it's argued by Arquez in 1991 that all biases can be kind of rolled up under these three headings, which are the same kind of things. Like you work off your associations too readily. Car doesn't start, it's got to be the battery. You suppose there's in some kind of situation, you always look at the same I don't know, the same cue. This is a psychophysically based, but the context may change. So, suppose if you always look for the same issue, it might not always work. And strategy based is kind of like the doctrinaire approach. If somebody always approaches every problem in the same way, well, fine, but it might not work. Inside and outside came up in my studies here. Inside basically is this kind of recurring theme that people tend to favor their own inner perspective over outer, more objective issues like, like this stuff they try to teach you in college, like statistics and, probability and utility theory, and well, just mere matters of fact. Are you faced with some, like Robert E. Lee? I mean, he had this inside personal perspective. Oh yeah, we can defeat the Union, but really, you looked at the outside. I mean, it's not going to work. So inside versus outside. Anchoring, I already talked about. This gives you a little bit more information. And the topic of judgment calibration comes up. Calibration like this is also in ML, but I haven't worked on it. Anyway, what this basically refers to is that there's, in most situations, there's kind of a more or less objective curve of, probabilities, the kind of graph we've all seen, but most people are overconfident or underconfident, or usually overconfident though. Usually overconfident. And this is a study of trying to get closer to the actual probability curve. And how am I doing for time? I guess it's going a little over. Uncertainty and complexity, of course, this is inherent in all aspects of judgment. Most humans suffer from overconfidence. That came up repeatedly in this my studies. People seldom understand the interaction of variables. We tend to focus on the easiest cause. The car won't start, that's the battery. And often we have simplistic notions of cause and effect. This is the last topic in my little presentation, choice. And what comes up repeatedly is value conflict. So if you've got multiple choices, each choice may have a set of attributes. And the problem is, how do you pick the one that has the set of attributes that you want, that's going to work out the best? Like everything else in judgment, we don't have a way of getting to the ideal. So here again, I just have a little quote here about years of decision research have made clear that people typically use simple decision processes, not idealized normative theories. Here are some more or less typical choice heuristics. Choose the option with the best value on the most important attribute. I mean, suppose you just want to marry somebody rich, for example, and the person might be, might hold up banks or maybe that's going a little bit too far, but might be really unattractive in other ways. But as long as the person's rich, that's enough. So that's the person you pick to be your soulmate or whatever. But satisficing is when you select the option, which the first option is, so it's kind of built for speed, which just passes some kind of minimum for all. So maybe you're looking for a mate. Well, it just has to be reasonably good looking, have some kind of income, drive a reasonable car, stuff like that. So as long as that person passes those cutoffs, then that's fine. I'm not sure if you want to take the first one, but anyway. So they talk more in this about there's hybrids, and there's not a one size fits all for this. Complexities, I highlight a few. Some people just don't want to lose money. So if you have one option, which you're going to lose $200, but it's the best option, really. Maybe you might gain money later, but you just can't stand losing $200, that kind of thing. So evaluate slight changes in the presentation or sequencing, make your choice different. I mean, we're human beings, right? And if you suppose you've got some kind of situation with multiple possible choices, and you kind of decide on the one you want to accept. But again, this keeps coming up. You focus too much on the positives, and then but if you're gonna reject some option, then you might have an imbalanced focus on the negatives. This is like, I mean, has anybody ever had this happen? You find a new girlfriend or whatever. She talks about all your good qualities, but then later on, when she breaks up, all she can talk about is the negative qualities, or even worse, what used to be a good quality is now a negative. So anyway, human psychology. Conceive of individual decision makers not as maximizing agents, as fundamentally different creatures. That's basically the summary. And to wrap things up, I guess that was about a half an hour's worth. Basically, I mean, what this really comes down to is, can a person or a machine, is the idea, the perspective, the understanding, and the judgments they make internally compatible with the real state of the world? Is it realistic? And are you actually looking at objective data, or just relying too much on yourself? Are you making too much out of the good things and ignoring the negative things? So to look at things objectively, look at the negatives too, and try to stay away from too quick of a decision. And that's the challenge, basically. So I think what I've just said kind of applies to AGI too. So that's the end of my slides. I'll stop sharing the screen. We can talk.